Hey everybody, welcome to today's very fun episode of Holistically Thriving. I have my friend Nina here. She is a certified sex coach and she has a podcast called Real Talk with Nina. And Real Talk. Okay. I was like, wait. And I have known Nina for a very long time, and she is one of the most vulnerable, open people I have ever met, which is like my kind of people. I love Nina. I love what she posts, and I love talking about sex. So I was like, Nina, come talk on my podcast about sex. Because for holistically thriving, right, there's all these areas of your life that you need to be working on in order to really be like thriving as a whole circle. And relationships is very important. So sex is one of those things, whether we're talking about sex with a partner or sex with yourself, because I know many women who are very uncomfortable with their own bodies. And that's a whole relationship right there, that if you feel like you're thriving in, nutrition and fitness in your job, but you're very anxious about your own body, or you have a lot of shame or all those kinds of things, then there's an area of your life that really needs to be worked on, right? So I invited Nina to come and talk today. And we were already talking before the podcast, and I was like, stop, we need to be recording this. Like, stop talking. So we're just going to roll with it. I don't know what's going to come out. We're just going to have fun. But Nina, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I remember when we first met and I found out that you went to UDEL, and I was like, okay. I was like, we're friends now automatically. I feel like blue hens are like a type of person. And so we all just kind of stick together. So yeah, like you said, I'm a certified sex coach. I'm married. I've been married. I've been with my husband for 18 years. I have 2 kids, almost 13 and 10. So I've been through all the ups and downs that relationships tend to go through. Sexually, emotionally, physically, all of the above. And I am a typical woman in that in our culture, I've also struggled with body images, my own sexuality, and how do I express that in a culture that has taught me to not express it my whole life, right? And how that impacted my marriage, how that impacted my relationships growing up, all of that stuff. And then just kind of how it led me to what I'm doing right now.
Whoa, that's awesome. So how long have you been a certified sex coach?
3 years. 3
Nice.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
And when people come to you, what is their main concern? Like the majority of people?
I would say multiple times a day, I get some sort of message or comment about my partner, and it is typically the female doesn't have a sex drive. That's usually it's mismatched sex drives is the hands down the most common. And I think I forgot to mention this earlier to you, Steph, on the phone, but I have a free sex drive webinar that you can find both on my, what's that?
I watched it a while ago when you said,
yes. So it's free. And you can get it either on my website, Real Talk with Nina, or on Instagram, in my profile for Nina Real Talk. It explains the types of sex drive, and hopefully you leave that webinar going, oh, I'm not broken. I do have a sex drive. It just isn't like my male partners, right? It's not that men are quote unquote more sexual than women. To be honest with you, I will tell you that when women tell me their fantasies, they are typically on a different level than when a guy thinks, oh, I'm such a freak, like I'll let her go near my butt, and I'm like, yawning. And then a woman's like, oh, I want my husband to be with another guy and I want to be in a gangbang. And I'm like, okay, no, they're like, so I feel like women historically have just been told to shut up about their sexuality. So we do. And so this consensus is that we don't have a sex drive. We only crave monogamy. We only crave emotional connections. We don't crave sexual connections. And they're truly couldn't be further from the truth. The truth. Again, it's not all women, just like it's not all men, right? But generally speaking, our culture completely erased female sexuality. It's starting to come back thanks to the millennials, right? But I will say that most of my coaching is actually helping people unlearn what they've been learning for the last 3-4 decades. They're usually, I'm a Gen Xer, so most of my clients are typically 35 to 50. But we all kind of came through the same teaching, is that don't talk about sex, don't even admit that you like it. If you do, you don't have fantasies if you're a woman, you don't masturbate if you're a woman. And it just kind of erased this whole truth about female sexuality. So, I'm only one person, but I'll do my part.
That's like one of the things that always boggles my mind. Like when we were in college back in the day, and men would just openly be talking about masturbation, and it would be just such a taboo topic for women. And it's like, why? And I actually do have a theory on that, but I would love to hear your theory on it. But I will say, like Sophie, who's my 3-year-old, I, from a very young age, when I was teaching, at like 15 months, I was teaching her body parts. And I taught her like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And this is your yoni, which is the Sanskrit, I know, but the Sanskrit word for, female reproductive organs. And she was very familiar with her yoni from a very young age. And, I'm trying so hard to make sure that she has no shame around it. She's aware that this is her body part. The other day, actually, she was like, she was red. And so I said, we have to get in the shower. We have to wash. And she was like, no. And I was like, do you want to see? And she was like, okay. And I saw, she was like, so fascinated. She was like, oh, and I was like, this is your yoni. And she was like, okay. And I think that's like, we start this shame from such a young age, but women, let's talk about it, man. What's your theory?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so many theories about sex in general, as far as gender goes. But, I think a lot of it is, it's a combination of a bunch of things, right? One, we're not supposed to be sexual, right? We're created as uterus having people to bear children, period. That's what we're supposed to do, which is why there's massive amounts of shame and guilt when a woman says, I actually don't want kids. It takes women so long to deal with the guilt and shame of feeling that way. Like, it's selfish. It only feels selfish because you're taught that the only reason why there should be any kind of penetrative intercourse is if you want a child. And I didn't even grow up in a religious family. And I absolutely, so much of it comes from religion. You don't even have to be religious. You just have to live in this country. Right? And so I think there's that. There's like, I'm not supposed to touch it for pleasure. It literally exists to be penetrated. That's what it's there for. And so there's that. There's also, I think women are also taught that our role in society sexually is to please men. And a lot, and to always be mindful of how men would sexually react to something, which is why if I'm a guy in high school and my pants are really tight and the bulge of my dick is showing, I probably won't get spoken to, right? Or called a whore or a slut. But if I'm a girl and maybe I have larger breasts and you can see some cleavage, or spaghetti straps, because apparently our shoulders are too sexual as women, apparently. We have to watch what we wear because of how boys or men might sexually react, right? So our whole existence has always been about how we can show up or how we may not want to show up for men. And I want to be super clear, Steph, I am not a man hater. I'm married to one. I gave birth to one. I love men. I think our patriarchal culture hurts men too, a lot, because it's the same reason why guys feel like they have to have a huge penis, why guys feel like they have to last a long time. All of that stuff, that's patriarchal views that You know, it's why men get super insecure about women who use toys in the bedroom. Why is my penis not enough? Why my penis isn't the be all and end all? What? Like, who told you that? Or who told you that that's your purpose? Just like our vagina has way more, and our vulva, like our clit, has way more purpose than reproduction.
Yeah.
Your penis has way more, it has such a more expansive potential for pleasure than just being a robotic penetrator of a vagina. Like,
Yeah.
it hurts everyone. This isn't this, when people talk about the patriarchy, it isn't a man-hating thing at all. It's quite the opposite. It's like, hey, we're all getting messed up from this cultural
Yeah.
thing that's going on, you know? Same with how men actually really aren't allowed to explore their sexuality. They're not allowed. Women are.
Mm-hmm.
I could openly talk. If I hooked up with a bunch of women in college, I could talk about it all the time. Nobody would go, "Oh my God, I think Nina's a lesbian." Nobody would say that. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, classic college drunken nights." Now, if a guy was like, "Oh yeah, I sucked a ton of dick in college," he's gay.
Totally.
He
Ooh, I
must
didn't know
be.
that.
He must be gay, right? What's the difference? I did exactly what he did. Why is it so? Everybody hurts from this. And same with guys who like anal stimulation, straight men that like anal stimulation from their female partner. So by definition, it's a heterosexual act. I speak to a lot of men that have been married 15 plus years. Oh, I can never tell my wife that I want her to touch me there. She'll think I'm gay. Because apparently anuses now have a sexual orientation. Apparently, I guess that's a new thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there's just, it's a lot. So I would say mismatched sex drives for sure. And then it's just like, we're bored. Like, everything else is fine. We're just like bored. Like, we don't know what to do. We're having the same type of sex. We don't really have conversations that are like stimulating sexually at all. We're just kind of going through the motions, and they're both bummed out about it, but they just don't know what to do. Those are my top two for sure.
Cool. Whoa, that was a lot. Whoa, I never even thought about the college thing. Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. There's even I just actually recently learned a term called a lug, which is a lesbian until graduation. So that's like this term that explains the college girl that like hooks up with girls, and then she graduates and she's like, "Oh yeah, no, that was like a college thing," and nobody questions her. So I just learned that term. A lug was a lesbian until graduation. So literally they have a term for it. But God forbid a guy was like, "Oh, I hooked up with a bunch of guys in college."
I did notice that, actually. I never heard lug, but I have noticed, I have a bunch of like friends that are still in college that I just know through family or whatever. And they're always posting like girls making out with girls. And I'm just like, wow, times have really changed. Like,
right. And no one's like, "Oh my gosh, did you hear that Jennifer's a lesbian? Look at nobody."
It's
They'd
like
be like,
acceptable.
"Oh," yeah, they'd be like, "Jen got wild in college." It would just be wild. But if Bobby shows pictures kissing a guy, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know Bobby was gay."
Yep.
Well, why is Bobby gay and Jennifer is just a wild college girl? What happened? Right?
Oh my
So
God.
it's the heteronormativity, it's the patriarchal bullshit. It hurts all of us. It's not a man-hating thing at all.
What's that word for when somebody wants a lot of sex? You're
A nymphomaniac?
yeah, nymphomaniac. Okay, so fun story. So my previous boyfriend, I wanted sex all the time. I was like, let's go every day. Like, I love sex. Sex is awesome. And he was like, you're a nymphomaniac. Like, I've never met a girl that wants this much sex. And I was like, sex is awesome. Like, let's have more sex. So it can actually be the other way too. Like, some women want more sex than men. So that's that mismatched sex drive that you were talking about.
100%. And how fast he was to judge you on it. Whereas when we hear about guys that want sex all the time, what do we say? "Oh, he's just a guy." Like, of course he wants sex. Guys say it. And if you're a guy friend of mine and they always roll their eyes, I'll call them out. Like, I'll say something like, if I say something, they're like, "Well, of course I would. I'm a guy." I'm like, no, just answer for yourself. Just answer for yourself, because I know women that don't want a relationship at all and love casual sex. and get annoyed when a guy wants anything emotional. So it isn't just a guy thing. Just answer for yourself. If you would do that, just say yes. But it'll be like, well, I'm a guy, of course I would. No, I know plenty of guys that don't want sex as much as their wives do, that don't like penetrative sex. It's like, that's another myth, is that all guys want penetrative sex. No, it's tiring. It's a lot of work for the penetrator.
And that emotional aspect too that you were just talking about is, I have a funny story about that. So when we actually broke up, I was like, hey, we can still have casual sex. Like, I'm really okay with this emotionally.
Yeah.
And he was like, there's no way, you're a woman. And I was like, no, really, like, I'm good with us being apart and I just want sex. Like, sex is awesome. And it took him a while and we actually never were able to do it. We did like other little things, but we didn't actually have sex, like full sex.
Right.
And so, because he was so afraid that I was a woman who was going to have emotions, and I was like, dude, just give me the D.
Yeah. And this exactly proves my point, right? And it's the same thing that the couples that have come to me about opening up their relationship, like either swinging or monogamish, I call it. It's been the woman. It's been the woman, because statistically, women, this is another massive myth that most people, guys won't believe me. Women that listen to this might actually.
Yes.
Statistically speaking, women get bored with monogamy faster than men.
Huh.
And I'm going to prove it to you in 2 seconds. 2 seconds, like flat, right?
Okay.
Why is it always that we're all hot and heavy in the beginning of a relationship, and then all of a sudden, is it just coincidence that the majority of women all of a sudden don't have a sex drive after that really fun period is over? Just a coincidence? Is that what it is? It has nothing to do with that. Maybe what we've all been taught is wrong, right? Because if I talk to a guy, oh, she doesn't have a sex drive, I'm like, how was it in the beginning? I always ask that. Oh my God, she wanted it all the time. It was so hot. Right? 99% of the time, that's the story. It's because living together and getting married actually has a negative, it's a negative correlation with women's sexual satisfaction.
That makes sense.
Right? Women, we love novelty and variety. Again, these are general statements. There are plenty of women that don't, right? I feel like I have to make that caveat because everyone's so in this gotcha culture. I got to be careful. But it's that movie, that Netflix showed Sex Life. Did you ever see it?
No.
You should watch it.
Wait, sex education or sex life?
No, Sex Life. Sex education is fabulous too.
I love that show.
Yeah, Sex Life. It's called Sex Life, and it was about this really adorable couple where the wife, they have children, and she starts to, like, she's bored and she's like, is this all there is? Like, now I'm like a wife and a mom, and like what happened to my younger years where I guess she had a lot of fun sexual escapades. And she starts to kind of reminisce about it and journal about it on her laptop, and her husband finds the laptop and sees kind of all of her feelings about her past sex lives and her sex escapades, and it kind of unfolds from there. So in that situation, the wife is the one that's like, I kind of miss this like wild sex crazed woman that I used to be, and now I'm like changing diapers and talking about bills with my husband and like looking at his shit streaks in the toilet. Like, this is my life now. you know you know. And so it really, it's, and I really do believe that if men that were attracted to women, like, you know, cis hetero men, embraced their female partner's sexuality and weren't so attached to their ego and all of the cultural messaging that tells them that if a woman likes variety, you're not man enough then, right? Like, what are you doing wrong? Whereas men are totally allowed to talk about, oh, I'd love a threesome with, you know, 3 women. And, but if a woman says, oh, what I would do for like 3 guys at once, she's a slut, right? So we kind of take all of this and just stuff it way, way deep down. And some women never bring it back up ever. Especially if they're in a monogamous relationship for the rest of their lives. They just are too ashamed, too guilty. What if my husband, you know, takes it wrong or what? Meanwhile, if you both embrace your fantasies. I'm not saying you have to open up your relationship, but
Yeah.
even just on a fantasy level,
Yeah.
right? To be able to talk about that can completely catapult your sex life completely without adding anybody, like a real person, into the equation.
Cool. There's I was on Bumble, the dating app, the other day, and it
Mm,
was I've seen this actually multiple times, like pictures of couples that are looking for a third or fourth person.
yep.
And this one made me laugh though, that it was a couple and the bio said something like, I'm looking for a queen for my queen.
Mm,
So clearly the woman was asking for
yep.
another woman.
Yep.
And yeah, that's
Yep. And then the other fantasy that's really common, and it's so funny because when I speak to some men, they're like, what? That's common? The hot wife fantasy, where, or even cuckolding, where the husband or male partner, whether they don't have to be married, enjoys watching their female partner with another man. There's so many psychological reasons behind that that are all so normal and human. And again, a lot of the guys feel like, what's wrong with me that that I'm turned on by the idea of my wife with another man,
yeah.
because our culture says that females are property of men. And what
Mhm.
kind of quote unquote beta male are you? I don't even believe in the alpha beta, by the way, but just culturally speaking, that's the slang term they use. It's all bullshit. But like, what kind of lame ass guy are you where you're okay sharing your property with
Mhm.
another man? That's the messaging, right? But
Sure.
again, when you have a woman that's like, oh, I think it'd be hot to be with another woman and my husband, nobody questions her femininity
Yeah.
or her worth as a woman in a relationship. It's what I'm saying. When people hear the word patriarchal views, or they're like, oh, it's like a feminist, nasty, man-hating bitch. I'm like, no, actually, I'm like the complete opposite of a man-hating.
Yeah,
I feel terrible
for sure.
for all of us that our sexuality is so stifled.
For sure. I think that a lot of women, we don't talk about it. We have a lot of shame around it. But I also think that men have a lot of shame around it, but they don't really talk about it as much as women do.
Yep.
So it's actually been blowing my mind the amount of men that I've talked to recently that are saying how much anxiety they have about not getting hard, or, so that goes back to what you were saying before. It's like, you don't even have to be hard. Just use your hands or your mouth or,
Correct.
do
Correct.
other things.
Yeah, and I think too, I think it was Glennon Doyle had a podcast once where her wife Abby, I think Glennon's sister Jessica, I think her name is, and Emily Nagoski wrote the book Come As You Are, and it's all about different sex drive types and how basically the female pleasure center and the male pleasure center are literally from the same tissue, like fetally the same tissue. They're just rearranged, they're
Yeah.
just arranged differently. And they were talking about this exact thing, like, why is it still a thing in our society that penis in vagina equals orgasm for the person who has the vagina? Why is that still a thing? It's literally been proven a gazillion times. There's that it's the clitoris. How you stimulate it, it might get stimulated during penetration,
Yeah.
depending on where it's located, for sure. But and they were talking, and I have thought this forever. So to hear someone say it was like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. It was, I believe, again, here comes the patriarchy stuff, that if men thought for a second that their penis wasn't required, it would be such a mass hit to the male ego that we're literally keeping this idea alive, right? Like, because if we say we don't need specifically a penis to penetrate us, we can be penetrated with fingers, we can be penetrated with dildos, right? Then what worth would a man have on earth if it's not for his penis? And that's another issue, that men are taught their worth is attached to their dick.
And how big it is.
Causes, and how big it is, and how hard it can get, and how long it can be hard for, and how fast it can get. Like, men are hurting too,
Yeah.
right? The anxiety, the lack of ability to explore or express their sexuality, the amount of men that have never experienced prostate pleasure simply because of this internalized homophobia that we all have because of how we grew up, is sad. We are all humans are subject to sexual oppression, repression, because of the culture that we grew up in. It isn't a gender thing.
Sure.
It's a cultural thing.
Yeah. Whoa. This is getting deep.
Right? Right?
Get
Yeah.
heavier.
It's a lot. It really, sexuality is so deep. No
Yeah.
pun intended. Well, pun intended, but also no pun intended.
Only a pun intended there. This is why I love Nina. Like you can like sessions with Nina are so fun because she's just so chill and relaxed and is just like open about it. Like that's why she's an awesome sex coach.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, I'm not for everyone. That's for sure. I'm not for everyone.
That's good, right?
Yeah, right. I don't
We
have
don't wanna
time to
change
be for everyone.
Yeah.
It's only one of me, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not your typical female, I would say, or maybe typical sex coach. I don't know, but you know.
I mean, I am super open about sexuality with like even in college, one of my friends had a sex party. What do you call it? It's like pampered chef party, but it was like
Yeah.
and there was like 10 of us there. And of course, the girl who was the party host or whatever, she knew right away from just me talking. And then I was like very loud and open. And she was like, "You're gonna be my demonstrator." I was like, sounds good. So like she was like, "Here, go do this in the bathroom. Here, go do this in the bathroom." I was like, okay. So so but it's just so sad how many people are just so like, oh my God, they would like have a meltdown if someone asked them to do that.
Yeah.
That's why this is so important.
And I think too, our sexuality is so, it doesn't get any more vulnerable or human than our sexuality. Even if you identify as asexual, I don't mean our horniness is who we are. I'm talking about our deepest vulnerabilities, kinks, fantasies, desires, fears, insecurities. So much of it can be released if you do the work to get comfortable with yourself sexually. And I think that our culture also looks at sex as such a superficial thing, and where if you knew what actually our sexuality is all about, it really is all encompassing. People, I mean, there are so many positive correlations to sexual confidence and career success. There were studies about those who masturbate and career success, especially in the sales field. I had a business coach once tell me that when she coaches salespeople specifically, she will literally say, "I want you to masturbate to the point of orgasm, but do not orgasm, and then I want you to make the sales call."
Ooh.
Right. The amount of energy that like, I don't even mean in a spiritual way. I mean like
life force.
Like the intensity of that experience. I mean, I absolutely do that. Like, if not for the sales thing, but like if I am creating content and there's like a total block, even if I'm not in the mood, I'm like, I'm gonna go get off real quick. I gotta like, something's gotta shift.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, I come back down. I'm like, all right. And we're back.
That's funny. Like some people would think like, "Oh, let me go get an energy drink."
Yeah.
But you're like, let me just go get off.
Yeah. Energy drink, schmenergy drink. I'm gonna rub one out real quick. I'll be right back.
And that's like the same thing too. Like at nighttime when I'm trying to fall asleep and I like cannot fall asleep and I have a million thoughts in my head, I'm just like, all right, well, I'll just do this quick and then I can fall asleep.
Correct. 100%. And I think that goes back to the other thing too, is I talk about porn a lot. And I understand that there are 2 sides to every story. I'm completely, compassionate and sympathetic for people who struggle with porn use. I am more in the camp of, let's talk about why you are having a negative experience with porn, right? Because you could have some person watch porn 6 times a day and it does not impact their life. You could have somebody watch porn once a day and they think that they're going to hell and something's wrong with their relationship, and all of these things come up. And the studies for that absolutely do show that, though we talk about the term porn addiction or sex addiction, I'm using quotes because, one, personally, I don't like attaching the word addiction to sex, but I do think that there are people who have compulsive sexual behavior for sure. I also think that they're not broken. We all have compulsive behaviors. I think there's way more stigma attached when it's sexual, right? Like, I love dark chocolate. When I'm stressed, I turn to it. When I'm, happy, I turn to it. When I'm sad, I turn to it, right? No one questions my dark chocolate addiction, right? And there are chemical shifts that happen in my brain when I have chocolate, for sure, like anybody else, but there's no stigma attached to that. So I can, or people who binge watch reality shows, there's no one's like, oh my gosh,
Yep.
they got to work on that. But if I watch porn every day, whoa, watch out, like there's an addiction, so there's so much of it is just the studies have shown people who think that they have a sex addiction or a porn addiction also have a lot of uh it's because they think that someone who watches it a lot, there's something wrong with those people. So if they're one of those people, something must be wrong. It's so subjective. And that's why I always say, like, it isn't, before you jump to, oh my gosh, I have this horrible problem, I think, to look at maybe where those feelings are coming from. I know people that watch porn several times. There are days where I watch it several times a day. I don't see myself as having a problem. It has never impacted me in a negative way. If I don't have a lot of work to do that day, guess what I'm doing? I'm getting off. And if I choose to use porn, I'm going to use porn. But it doesn't impact my relationship with my husband. In fact, you can use it together. Yeah, it helps. Like, so it depends on the person, and but when we talk about, women who, I masturbate to go to bed at night. Oh, what's wrong? Like, why can't you fall asleep without doing that? But if you said stuff, I take, Excedrin PM to help me fall asleep at night.
That's normal.
Normal.
Melatonin.
We're so afraid of pleasure in this. I don't want to say in the world, because there are countries that are way better off than we are, but
like
overall, yes,
naked
right?
on the beach.
We fear pleasure.
Totally.
And it's sad, because especially now in the world, I think we need pleasure more than anything on earth right now, whether it's with a partner or with yourself. I think that, such a wonderful thing we're given to experience, and yet the amount of negative feelings attached to pleasure for all human beings is the real tragedy. Not sex itself, not pleasure itself. It's the shame and the guilt that's associated with it. That makes me sad.
I know. I agree. That's why I knew that sex was going to be one of my topics, because it's just so important. If you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself or with your partner, that really impacts people's lives.
Absolutely.
And sometimes people just have no idea, like they don't even realize it. For example, I had a friend in college she was so terrified of her own body. And then she ended up giving birth a couple of years later, and the only thing she had ever done was have penetrative sex with her husband. So like, imagine someone who holds so much shame, because I love birth and I love talking about birth.
Yes.
Imagine someone who has so much shame around their vagina and their vulva, and then you expect this person to push a baby out of it. Like, they're so afraid of connecting with that part of their body, and then they're expected to give birth. Like, that's not going to work. And it's not going to be a positive, beautiful experience. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I think too, along with that goes when we become mothers, if we choose to become a mother, the struggle that a lot of women have between being a mother and being sexual, it's like we've been taught that's like oil and water, right? If I was twerking on Instagram and did not have children, I would just be another girl twerking on Instagram. But if I have children and I'm twerking on Instagram, I'm trashy. What a trashy mom. I can't believe she would do that,
I hope her kids don't see it.
Right. Right. I'm like, trust me, your kids have seen way worse at this point. Trust me that kids now are seeing porn at like 9 years old. So it's that, and I struggled with that too. I think becoming a mom was like my whole identity for a very long time. And not only did it put so much unnecessary, harmful actually pressure on me, it stripped me of my own sexuality for years,
Oh,
years. And of course, that impacted my relationship.
yeah.
And when our relationship makes up a large part of our lives, it impacted my mental health. My mental health then trickled into my job, how I parented, how I showed up as a sister and a daughter, how I showed up. So when I say sexuality literally impacts our entire life,
Mm-hmm.
I quite literally mean that it impacts our entire life. It trickles into everything.
I agree.
People that tend not to speak up in the bedroom, which unfortunately is a lot of women, tend not to speak up in the workplace and ask for a raise either, because they don't believe they deserve it. They question whether they deserve it. They don't want to seem like too confident as a woman, because if we're too confident, then we're seen as a bitch. Whereas a guy that's seen as very confident is seen as a leader. Right. So those messages are all over. It's not just in the bedroom, it's outside the bedroom, and so a lot of women tend to have a hard time speaking up because we don't want to seem too forward or too high maintenance or too needy, because that's how femininity is defined in our culture.
Yeah.
Overly emotional, overly dramatic, needy, clingy, high maintenance, right? And we're so conscious of that a lot of women are passive aggressive in relationships because we don't want to be seen as the naggy girlfriend or the naggy wife. So we just kind of like drop hints, which comes out as obnoxious. And then they argue with their partner because they should have known. It's so all over the place. And it really does. A lot of it comes back to, if you can get comfortable with your sexuality on all levels, your kinks, fetishes, desires, fears, insecurities, all of it, the amount of power that you have as a human being in this world is astronomically higher and more than for those who hide from such a critical piece of who we are just as a human being, and that's what I wish for everyone, not because I'm some self-actualized sex guru, because I'm not. I've had my own sex journey just like every other person in the world, and I'm still on it, and I will probably be on it forever, right? But it's because I have made a large shift from that person who lived into all of the messages that women receive, and it impacted everything about my life. And once I made that shift, and it wasn't overnight, obviously, it's actually, I don't think it's a coincidence that when that shift started to happen, I started working for myself, which was scary as hell. Scary, leaving a steady paycheck. My husband is a teacher, so it isn't like I don't have to work. I have to work. And my sex life with my husband completely shifted. The way I parent and show up for my kids, completely different. The way I handled my own mental health. Like I was diagnosed with OCD as a very young kid. And so it's amazing that empowered feeling helped me take charge of every aspect in my life. And so if I can give permission for more people to do that and be their cheerleader and help them work through the yucky feelings, then I will do that. So that's what I decided to do for the rest of my life. And here I am.
That's awesome. I love it. That's so empowering and amazing. And sexual energy is serious. Like it's very powerful. Like you're talking about, as soon as you learn how to like unleash that and use it in your regular life, then your whole world will change.
Yeah.
So let's say that there's somebody who's listening right now who is listening to us and they're like, I have no idea how to get in touch with my sexuality. What would you tell someone?
Yeah. So, coach with me. No, I'm just kidding. So, on their own, right? So if you don't know how to get in touch with your sexuality, a few things.
You don't have to give us all your golden nuggets.
Yeah.
Like,
expose yourself to sexual, to mental sexual stimuli, whether that's erotic films, whether that's reading erotica, whether that's fantasizing. A lot of people say, I don't have a fantasy. Like, I've never fantasized before. A lot of people have fantasized, but their definition of a fantasy is not accurate. They think it has to be some like massive, it doesn't have, it could be anything that turns you on. Anything that turns you on. But a lot of people don't know where to start. So like, if you're super uncomfortable with porn, totally cool. Try erotica, try reading erotica, or try reading 50 Shades of Grey, or maybe it's not strict erotica. Maybe it's more of like a sexual novel. Maybe you're not even ready for erotic yet, but
watch The Notebook.
Right. Watch Sex Life on Netflix, right? So there are so many, a lot of us are, again, especially women, we don't know about our sexuality because we've never put ourselves in a position to be exposed to something to bring that out. We've hid from it, right? And so that would be my number one is, if you don't know where to start, find something that gives you a point, like your first stop, right? So whether that's porn, whether that's erotica, whether that's just fantasizing, whether that's writing your own erotica, whether, again, reading a Harlequin novel, or expose yourself to things that have a sexual, and again, there's so much on Netflix alone. Watch Bridgerton. Like, it doesn't have to be porn, but
Season
just
two.
yeah, right, like just tap into some sexual stimuli that you're like, oh, okay, like maybe all of a sudden, wow, I'm really into like old Victorian vibe sex, like that's really hot. Or maybe whatever, there's so much.
Outlander.
So I haven't watched that yet, but someone's like, I know, but someone's like, Nina, how have you not watched? I binge watched Game of Thrones with my husband, and that was awesome. But someone's like, how have you not watched Outlander? I'm like, I don't know, clearly I have to watch.
You have to watch it. Just skip to episode 7, season 1.
Okay, got it. I don't want to waste any time here, right? I got stuff to do.
Just kidding, watch from the beginning. But episode 7 is like, whew.
Okay, got it. I'm on it.
So good. Oh my God, that's so funny. All right, cool. Well, that's awesome. I wanted to say, you just reminded me when you said porn before, when we were talking about porn too. It doesn't even have to be, I think some women feel like like you were talking about, there's a lot of shame around women watching porn. It's like so accepted that men can watch porn, and women are like, you're dirty if you're watching porn. And I remember I had a conversation with an ex-boyfriend also, and he said something about porn, like as a joke. And I was like, yeah, we can watch it. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, like why is this such a big deal? Yeah. It's not a big deal, and when we put it on, it was more for like, oh, let's see what these people are doing, It was like a learning experience. And I was like, oh, that's good. And he was like, I don't like that one. And I was like, oh, that one looks good. And he'd be like, yeah, that one looks good. So it doesn't have to be like this. I feel like women are just so afraid to even touch the button to look at it because they're so like, oh my God. And there's like super cheesy, gross, like stuff that I'm not into from like the 80s.
Yeah.
It's just more of like people who are like more sensual, and they're like more emotional about it. It's not just like, jackhammer sex. It's more like, oh, this is romantic sex, right? Mm-hmm. And that is way more like, wow, that's really beautiful. And you can learn some things. And so like, that was a whole thing with a past relationship where he was just so like, what do you mean you watch? I was like, I don't, but I will with you. Like, what's the big deal?
It's another sexual stimulus. It's just another, or stimuli. What's the plural? Stimuli is plural, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, we're just gonna call it that. So it's definitely, it's just something else to turn you on. It's and talk about it, and you might realize like, wow, that was hot. Like, I didn't expect to get turned on by that, but I was, right? And that's what I mean by like, if you don't understand, if you've never tapped into your sexuality, to expose yourself to some things in a legal manner that taps into that. We don't necessarily naturally exist in a sexually aroused state. So like, it's kind of hard to tap into your brain when you're not even there yet. So like, have something that helps you get there, and then be like, oh, actually, like I just had a client. Oh, no. I never know if it's a client or somebody through Instagram where I have like, you can ask me a question on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Was on Instagram. He said, my wife, they've been married a while. They're total, like their relationship is solid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not because they've been married a while, but because legitimately their marriage is solid.
Yeah.
Uh, she wants him to call her a slut.
Okay.
And he was like, I don't think I can
Oh yeah.
do it. Right. And that's also a massive like misunderstanding that women don't consensually want to be degraded or, like that's, yes, on the street, if someone's like, hey, slut, I would feel furious and I'd probably cry and feel disgusting. But
Yeah.
in the bedroom, consensually with someone that I'm comfortable and I love, maybe it turns me on. But
Mm-hmm.
I think women are also afraid to talk about that. But she did. She was like, hey, I think it'd be really hot if you call me a slut. And he's like, oh, what do I do? So I always say, like, maybe find porn clips where you start to get used to being like, okay, actually, like I just watched him call her that. And it actually didn't seem disrespectful. It was like they were both into it and it was hot. And, so sometimes I actually use porn as homework with clients if they're comfortable watching porn or if they're already watching it. I was like, I absolutely assign porn as homework because I think it helps us um, get exposed to things that maybe we have really kind of archaic messages about. Pegging, for example, that's another thing I work with heterosexual couples on. Like if the wife wants to peg, or use a dildo on the
Oh
husband anally.
yeah.
Sorry, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes up about that, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's dive into the cultural messages that are causing you to feel this way, because none of them are based in truth, right? So let's do that first. And then I want you to start looking at porn clips where the guy is still sitting in his masculine energy and he is the dominant one in that situation, even though he's receiving,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're taught that receiving equals feminine, equals weak, equals girly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're taught. So if any of those things switch, all of a sudden, a woman who's pegging her husband, she's dominant and masculine. And there are plenty of clips out there that show the guy completely in control and 100% the dominant one in that situation while he's receiving. So it's messaging and unlearning it. And sometimes, just like textbooks back in the day, sometimes we need visual or things that you can read to help you unlearn the messaging that's getting in the way of you enjoying your sexuality.
For sure. I think that's really important that you are doing that, like that you're diving deep into like figuring out why a person is thinking this way, because there really is no reason why a person thinks a certain way other than the social conditioning that we've learned.
Correct.
So that's amazing that you're just helping people unlearn behavior so that they can enjoy themselves and, make that area of themselves whole again, which it probably started when they were a baby, but then just unraveled where they are now.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, this was amazing. And
a lot, right?
we're just going to keep talking. And I feel like we should totally do this again.
Sure, anytime.
And we can talk about this, all different things. There's so many things to talk about.
It really is.
For sure. And I think, tell everyone how they can find you. That's important.
So, on Instagram, you can either look up the hashtag Real Talk with Nina, or my handle is Nina Real Talk. But again, it's Real Talk with Nina or Nina Real Talk. My website is realtalkwithnina.com. I'm most active on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. Again, if you go to Facebook and type in Real Talk with Nina, you'll find it. Yeah. But I find that Instagram is just more my preferred, method of communication. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so anybody can book a session with you, even if you're single.
Yep. Even if you're single. Yep.
And you need to learn how to tap more into your own sexuality. You definitely need to talk to Nina.
Yeah.
If you are a couple, you can also talk to Nina.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have a special code for everybody?
I sure do. So if you use Steph 10, so STEPH 10, you'll get 10% off your first coaching session with me. Awesome. So if you reach out to me on Instagram or email or anything, just let me know Steph 10 and that you got it from this podcast, and I will give you 10% off of our first coaching session.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Nina. This was
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm like fascinated by the whole doula thing you were working on. And I was like, oh my gosh, I witnessed my sister's delivery, which was the
awesome.
only, which was literally, including my own two, the only delivery I've ever witnessed. I had
Yeah.
two emergency C-sections and I was like completely out of it. My sister delivered vaginally and I was there from the beginning to the end. And oh my God, like I have a tremendous amount of respect for doulas, midwives, labor and delivery nurses. Like it's just whole how you guys keep it calm and keep it together and amazing. So I could yeah, that's intense. Like kudos to you, man.
Thanks. Doula work is beautiful.
Yeah.
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 We can talk all about birth and sex and vaginas and like that could be a whole
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk about what gets you to the pregnancy space, and you can talk about what happens from pregnancy on.
But that is so important though, right? Like it makes so much sense that if you're not in tune with your body and then you're expected to push a baby out, but that'll be another podcast we'll do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm
Cool.
down. I'm down. Thank you so much, Steph, for
Thank
having
you,
me. I really
Nina.
appreciate it.
Of course. And for everybody listening, I hope you've enjoyed today's Holistically Thriving episode. Please share it with a friend if you've enjoyed it. Reach out to Nina or at least just follow her because she's so fun to follow. And, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys.